Amatsukaze, meaning heavenly wind, was a Kagerō-class destroyer in the Imperial Japanese Navy. The Kagerō-class was a larger and refined development of the earlier Asashio-class. Each ship carried a crew of 240 officers and sailors. They had an overall length of 118.5 meters or 388 feet 9 inches, a beam of 10.8 meters or 35 feet 5 inches, and a draft of 3.76 meters or 12 feet 4 inches. At standard load, they displaced 2,065 metric tons, and at deep load, 2,529 metric tons. Propulsion came from 2 Kampon-geared steam turbines, each linked to a single propeller shaft, with steam from 3 Kampon water tube boilers. These turbines generated 52,000 shaft horsepower, enabling a top speed of 35 knots. Their operational range was 5,000 nautical miles at a cruising speed of 18 knots. Amatsukaze was unique among her sister ships for using an experimental boiler system that produced higher steam pressure. Although her maximum speed stayed the same at 35.5 knots, she achieved significantly better fuel efficiency than her counterparts, giving her a noticeably greater range. The primary armament of the Kagerō-class featured 6 Type 327mm or 5-inch dual-purpose guns arranged in 3 twin turrets, one located forward of the superstructure and a super-firing pair positioned aft. Initially equipped with 4 Type 96 25mm or 1-inch anti-aircraft guns in 2 twin mounts, additional units were added as the war progressed. The ships also carried 2 quadruple rotating mounts for 610mm or 24-inch torpedo tubes, launching the oxygen-powered Type 93 long lance torpedoes, with 1 reload provided per tube. For anti-submarine warfare, they were fitted with 16 depth charges. Amatsukaze was laid down at the Maizuru Naval Arsenal on February 14, 1939, launched on October 19 that same year, and officially commissioned on October 26, 1940. In early 1941, she came under the command of Captain Tameichi Hara. On November 25, Amatsukaze assembled with more than 200 vessels of the combined fleet at Yokosuka, then departed with 3 sister ships under the light cruiser Jinsu to support the invasion of the Philippines. By the time of the Pearl Harbor attack on December 7, 1941, she had rendezvoused with the light carrier Ryujo for escort duty to Palau. After escorting Ryujo to Palau, Amatsukaze protected Legazpi from December 12 to 19. On the 20th, she departed with the invasion fleet bound for the port of Davao. Anchored offshore, Amatsukaze launched high-speed motorboats filled with troops while remaining positioned to engage port defenses and nearby ships. Around 200 enemy machine gunners opened fire from land, killing 1 soldier and wounding several. In response, Amatsukaze shelled the attackers with her 12.7-centimeter guns, forcing them to retreat and inflicting heavy casualties. A stray shell struck a British oil tanker, igniting it and leaving it ablaze for over 3 days until it was declared a total loss. Soon after, Amatsukaze detected an enemy submarine and slowed to 8 knots to improve sonar accuracy. She made 2 depth charge attacks and a large oil slick surfaced, leading Captain Hara to believe the submarine had been sunk. Amatsukaze was anchored at Davao when B-17 bombers launched an air raid on the port. Although unable to maneuver, the ship sustained no damage. Following several patrol operations and transfers between naval bases, Amatsukaze departed Magnaga Bay on January 9, 1942, and linked up with the Minato invasion force on the 11th. After a successful escort mission, she reached the Banka anchorage on the 17th, then sailed with the Kendari invasion force on the 24th, followed by duties with the Ambon invasion force on the 29th. Upon arriving at Hidolama anchorage on the 30th, she received wounded personnel from Ambon on February 1st and remained there until February 20th to escort the Timor invasion force. On February 26th, Amatsukaze and several other destroyers came under renewed air attacks but again escaped without damage. A Japanese reconnaissance plane soon located the group and relayed word of an approaching Allied force of 5 cruisers targeting Japanese troop convoys. Amatsukaze joined the heavy cruisers Haguro and Nachi, the latter's floatplane shadowing the enemy and providing updates. By 6 a.m. on February 27th, Captain Hara aboard Amatsukaze sighted the enemy formation, 2 heavy cruisers, 3 light cruisers, and 9 destroyers, and ordered his ships to close in at short range. At roughly 6,000 meters, Amatsukaze sustained light damage from near misses and was briefly blinded by smoke from the destroyer Tokitsukaze, which had taken a direct shell hit. Hara then commanded a torpedo salvo, joining 6 other destroyers in launching a total of 56 torpedoes. None of these struck their targets. Although the Dutch destroyer HNLMS Kortenaer was hit and sunk almost instantly by a Japanese torpedo, the kill was credited to Haguro, not the destroyers. Later that night, Amatsukaze was patrolling in search of enemy vessels when she encountered 4 destroyers, USS Paul Jones, Alden, John D. Ford, and John D. Edwards, which had detached from the main force after using all their torpedoes. Amatsukaze opened fire on the group, but did not activate her searchlights, retreating from the numerically superior formation. No hits were scored on either side, while Haguro and Nachi pressed on with the Battle of the Java Sea, securing a major Japanese victory. Amatsukaze saw no further action. On February 28th, after the battle had ended, she came across the hospital ship Op 10 Nord, which was rescuing Allied sailors from sunken warships. Amatsukaze stopped the vessel. Captain Hara observed through binoculars as Op 10 Nord's captain came topside to speak with his Japanese counterparts. Amatsukaze was ordered to escort the ship to Bowen Island as a war prize, sparing its crew. During the trip, Amatsukaze reported the location of about 100 Allied survivors to Japanese command, aiding in their eventual recovery. On March 1st, Amatsukaze delivered Op 10 Nord to Banjarmasin, where the ship was converted into the prison vessel Tenno Maru. After refueling, Amatsukaze resumed patrol duties in the Java Sea. That same day, while sailing with other vessels, she spotted the surfaced U.S. submarine USS Seal, the first of several submarine encounters over the next 2 days. Seal launched 4 torpedoes at Jinsu, missing completely, and crash-dived before Amatsukaze could fire a shot, leaving Captain Hara and his crew frustrated. Later that night, Amatsukaze encountered the Dutch submarine HNLMS KX. Her lookouts detected the vessel, and she opened fire with 32 rounds, igniting the sub and forcing it to dive. The destroyer Hatsukaze then joined in, each ship dropping 6 depth charges that severely damaged KX. A large oil slick appeared and the sub was believed sunk. Though KX initially survived and made it back to port heavily damaged, she was scuttled the following day due to the worsening Japanese advance in the Dutch East Indies. The damage caused primarily by Amatsukaze had rendered her unable to escape. All remained quiet on March 2nd, but on the night of the 3rd, Captain Hara spotted a faint, flickering light from the bridge that quickly vanished. Viewing through his binoculars, he identified it as a sailor lighting a cigar aboard the disabled American submarine USS Perch. 2 days earlier, on March 1st, Perch had been forced to dive and was heavily damaged by depth charges from the destroyers Minagumo and Natsugumo. The next day, she suffered further damage from Ushio and Sazanami, leaving her unable to submerge and operating on only one engine, limiting her speed to 5 knots. Amatsukaze accelerated to 30 knots as Perch fired torpedoes that missed, allowing Amatsukaze to land 3 confirmed gun hits. Her escort, the destroyer Yukikaze, joined the attack, and the combined damage forced Perch's crew to scuttle the submarine. The following morning, Captain Hara assembled Amatsukaze's crew on deck, praised their performance, and declared a ban on smoking topside in light of the encounter. Amatsukaze resumed patrols through the rest of March, but no further submarines were encountered. On March 31st, Amatsukaze participated in a shore bombardment of Christmas Island, known for its rich phosphate ore reserves. Before the landings were even completed, British troops surrendered and began loading the ore onto Japanese transports. On April 1st, Amatsukaze saw the light cruiser Naka's bow torn off by a torpedo from the submarine USS Seawolf, and then escorted the damaged ship to Singapore. From April 25th to May 3rd, Amatsukaze underwent repairs in dry dock at Kure, and between May 21st and May 25th, she sailed from Kure to Saipan. During the Battle of Midway, Amatsukaze was assigned to escort a troop convoy for the planned invasion of Midway Island. She did not engage in combat, instead receiving updates over radio as the battle unfolded. Captain Hara listened grimly as the tide turned, with 4 Japanese carriers and a heavy cruiser destroyed by American carrier strikes. Though Admiral Yamamoto initially ordered a surface attack, he canceled the plan within 2 hours. On June 7th, Amatsukaze assisted in scuttling the damaged carrier Akagi. On August 16th, Amatsukaze sailed with the Japanese fleet to Truk before joining the Guadalcanal campaign. On August 24th, she escorted a decoy carrier group during the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, avoiding heavy attacks from American and land-based aircraft. Though undamaged, she witnessed the light carrier Ryujo sunk by aircraft from the carrier USS Saratoga. Following the battle, Amatsukaze rescued survivors from Ryujo and crew from a downed Zuikaku bomber. She patrolled around Truk throughout September, then searched for a U.S. seaplane base in October. On the 15th, she joined Admiral Kondo's carrier group and escorted it into the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands. On October 26th, airstrikes from U.S. carriers hit several Japanese ships, but caused no sinkings, while Japanese aircraft sank USS Hornet and USS Porter and damaged several other U.S. ships. Amatsukaze emerged unscathed and returned to Truk, remaining in port for the rest of October. At Truk, Amatsukaze joined a powerful Japanese task force preparing for another bombardment of Henderson Field, a former Japanese airstrip now being used by U.S. forces to harass Japanese shipping. The core of the force included the battleships Hiei and Kirishima, each armed with 8 14-inch guns, and a mix of smaller weapons. Escorting the force were the light cruiser Nagara and 11 destroyers, including Amatsukaze. The group departed on November 9, 1942. As the destroyers advanced toward a rain squall, the formation broke up, leaving them scattered in smaller clusters. Amatsukaze found herself near the center left of the formation alongside Yukikaze and Teruzuki. In the early hours of November 13th, enemy ships were detected around 1:25 a.m. A U.S. force of 2 heavy cruisers, 3 light cruisers, and 8 destroyers had intercepted the Japanese. At 1:48, Hiei and Akatsuki illuminated USS Atlanta, initiating a close-range battle that led to Akatsuki's destruction. Amatsukaze's group was drawn into the fight. As Yukikaze and Teruzuki moved in to engage, Amatsukaze was temporarily blocked by Ikazuchi and Inazuma, which were preparing a counterattack against the American ships that had just sunk Akatsuki, successfully destroying Atlanta. Meanwhile, shells from USS Cushing that missed Hiei landed dangerously close to Amatsukaze, dousing her in spray, but before any damage was done, Yukikaze and Teruzuki located and sank Cushing. Eventually, the path was cleared, and Captain Hara ordered Amatsukaze to advance at full speed to engage and destroy enemy warships, eager to apply his expertise in torpedo warfare. As Amatsukaze passed the battleship Hiei and moved into range, star shells from the cruiser Nagara illuminated a group of American destroyers firing on Hiei: USS Fletcher, Monson, Aaron Ward, and Barton. At roughly 5,000 meters, Amatsukaze continued closing the distance while her torpedo crew prepared a spread of 8 Type 93 torpedoes. At 3,000 meters, following careful targeting adjustments, the torpedoes were launched, marking a successful application of Hara's torpedo tactics. Aaron Ward and Monson managed to narrowly avoid the deadly spread, skillful maneuvering allowing them to barely escape. Barton, however, was less fortunate. She had slowed to avoid a collision with the turning Aaron Ward and couldn't accelerate in time. 2 torpedoes from Amatsukaze struck her, one in the engine room, the other in the boiler room, causing a violent explosion of flame and steam. The destroyer broke apart and sank within minutes, taking 164 crew members with her. Amatsukaze then fell back to Hiei's position to reload her torpedoes, a process that took several minutes. During this time, she spotted the destroyer Udachi under fire from the light cruiser USS Juno. Though no hits landed, Amatsukaze moved in to support Udachi and closed the distance to target Juno with her newly reloaded torpedoes. 4 torpedoes were launched, and roughly 3 minutes later, one struck Juno on her port side. The impact snapped her keel, knocked out all electrical power, and reduced her speed to 13 knots, forcing her to retreat from the engagement. Had Amatsukaze launched a full spread of 8 torpedoes, she may have sunk Juno outright, but the damage had already set her fate. Later that morning, the crippled cruiser was struck again, this time by a torpedo from the submarine I-26, hitting nearly the same location as Amatsukaze's earlier strike. Juno broke in half and sank rapidly, taking most of her crew with her. Among the dead were all 5 Sullivan brothers, whose loss led to the creation of the sole survivor policy in the United States, allowing the last surviving sibling of a fallen family to be discharged from combat service. After contributing to the crippling of Juno, Amatsukaze moved to rejoin Hiei, whose burning superstructure from sustained cruiser and destroyer shellfire made her the only easily identifiable ship. On her way, however, Amatsukaze nearly collided with a strange ghost ship that showed no signs of life. Captain Hara, unable to recognize its silhouette, initially thought the submarine tender Jingei had somehow wandered into the battle. But when a searchlight was switched on, he realized the mystery vessel was the heavily damaged heavy cruiser USS San Francisco, so devastated by earlier fire from Hiei and Kirishima that she barely resembled a warship, though she remained afloat. Amatsukaze launched her last torpedoes and opened fire with her 6 12.7-centimeter guns for the first time in the engagement. The range was so close that nearly every shell reportedly hit, destroying San Francisco's remaining port-side secondary guns and setting her bridge ablaze, killing several officers and crew members. However, to Hara's astonishment, none of the torpedoes detonated. He soon realized that a safety mechanism on the Type 93 torpedoes prevented them from exploding within 500 meters to avoid friendly fire, rendering the salvo ineffective against San Francisco. In his frustration, Captain Hara forgot that Amatsukaze's searchlights were still on. By the time he ordered them turned off, it was too late. The bright beam had already drawn the attention of the light cruiser USS Helena. Almost immediately, 6-inch shells began landing around the ship. As Amatsukaze attempted to deploy a smokescreen, the third salvo struck her fire control station, killing everyone inside. Another shell followed, hitting the radio room, and 3 additional hits disabled the hydraulic systems, rendering both her guns and steering wheel inoperable. In total, 43 crew members were killed. Relief came just in time as 3 Japanese destroyers, Asagumo, Murasame, and Samedar, entered the fight and charged Helena, diverting her fire away from Amatsukaze. This gave the crippled destroyer a chance to slip behind a smokescreen. From cover, Hara watched as Murasame appeared to torpedo and sink Helena. Though in reality, the cruiser survived the engagement with minimal damage. Despite the damage sustained, Amatsukaze's engine remained functional, and her crew was able to manually steer the ship using the rudder near the stern while concealed in a smokescreen to conduct emergency repairs. During this time, the crew observed the destroyer USS Monsen being sunk by gunfire from Asagumo, Murasame, and Samidare. As the battle neared its end, Amatsukaze withdrew from the engagement, maintaining a speed of 20 knots. At daybreak, she encountered U.S. bombers, but their attacks were poorly aimed, and no bombs found their target. No further airstrikes followed, as all attention was directed at the crippled battleship Hiei, whose rudder had been jammed by earlier hits from San Francisco. Hiei was ultimately finished off by concentrated air attacks. Later, Amatsukaze unexpectedly crossed paths with the destroyer Yukikaze, which had also arrived to aid Hiei. In sharp contrast, Yukikaze had emerged from the battle completely unscathed. As the two ships passed, their crews exchanged greetings from their decks. Amatsukaze reached Truk on November 14th, receiving a warm welcome from anchored ships. Upon arrival, a funeral ceremony was held for the 43 crew members lost in battle before she departed for Kure, arriving on November 18th to undergo immediate repairs. During this repair period, Tameichi Hara was reassigned on January 10, 1943, to command the destroyer Shigure and was succeeded by Commander Tanaka Masao. While in dock, Amatsukaze received upgraded anti-aircraft defenses, including new AAA mounts placed on her bridge and near the aft funnel, along with the installation of basic spotting radar systems. In February, repairs were finalized, and on the 5th, Amatsukaze departed Kure to escort the cruiser Kumano to Truk, arriving there on the 10th. She then carried out a troop transport mission to Wewak, followed by towing the disabled destroyer Harusami back to Truk. After remaining anchored at Truk for a short period, Amatsukaze escorted a tanker convoy to Palau between March 19th and April 3rd. Over the next several months, she performed a series of escort duties for large troop convoys traveling between Palau, Wewak, and Hansa Bay, continuing until July. On August 1st, Amatsukaze returned to Kure for routine maintenance, during which she was fitted with new Type 22 radar systems. From August 16th to 23rd, Amatsukaze sailed alongside the battleship Yamato en route to Truk, and from September 18th to 25th, she joined the Japanese fleet in a mobilization aimed at countering American carrier raids, though the force ultimately saw no combat. Between October 21st and 27th, Amatsukaze escorted the tanker Hoyomaru from Truk to Aniwetok in support of fleet operations in the Marshall Islands. On November 2nd, she departed on a mission to transport aircrew personnel to Rabaul, assisting the damaged tanker Nisho Maru along the way. On November 11th, her commanding officer, Tanaka, was promoted from commander to captain, after which Amatsukaze resumed escort duties, covering convoys between Palau and Truk from the 12th to the 24th. She concluded her 1943 operations by escorting the light carrier Chaitos and the supply ship Irako from Truk to Yokosuka between December 7th and 14th. On January 11, 1944, Amatsukaze set out into the South China Sea to escort high-speed oil tankers bound for Singapore. During the voyage, the task force was spotted by the submarine USS Redfin. Amatsukaze moved in to investigate, but Redfin crash-dived before any action could be taken, prompting Amatsukaze to turn back toward the convoy. This maneuver proved fatal as Redfin was left with a clear broadside and launched 4 torpedoes. One struck Amatsukaze on the port side between the first and second compartments, triggering a magazine explosion. The destroyer began to list forward and was soon torn in half. The bow section sank quickly, taking 80 crew members with it, including Captain Furukawa Bunji. However, the aft section of Amatsukaze remained afloat. The rest of the convoy presumed her sunk after a failed attempt by nearby ships to search for survivors, leaving the wreck drifting for 6 days. With the engine flooded and all operational radio equipment lost when the forward half sank, the crew was stranded without communication in the open ocean. On January 16th, a Japanese patrol plane spotted the drifting Amatsukaze, prompting the elderly destroyer Asagao to tow her for emergency repairs to Singapore, where they arrived on the 24th. Upon reaching Singapore, Amatsukaze was immediately dry docked for emergency repairs. However, due to a lack of resources, full repairs could not be completed, and she remained in dry dock for the next 10 months as a half-finished ship. On November 15th, a false bow was installed to make her seaworthy, although she was still far from fully repaired. With a length of just 72.4 meters or 237 feet 6 inches, Amatsukaze was equipped with 4 12.7 centimeter or 5-inch guns and 2 twin turrets aft and a single quadruple torpedo tube mount. Initially capable of only 12 knots, repairs increased her top speed to 20 knots. In this condition, Amatsukaze was assigned to local patrol and escort duties far from the front line. She continued in this role until February 10, 1945, when the destroyer Kasumi arrived in Singapore. Captain Tomoyuki Morita, an experienced officer, was transferred from Kasumi to Amatsukaze as the Japanese planned to send her back to mainland Japan for full repairs. Amatsukaze was to escort convoy HI-88J, the final convoy from Singapore to Japan, and upon arrival she would be docked for the extensive repairs she desperately needed. After a brief period of training duties, Amatsukaze left Singapore on March 19th to escort 7 troopships to Japan, marking her first time back in the open ocean since being torpedoed by Redfin. 2 days after departure, the troopship Sarawaka Maru struck a mine and sank, but for the next week the rest of the convoy proceeded relatively smoothly. However, on the 27th, a B-24 bomber spotted the convoy, and as one U.S. plane attacked, others followed. Amatsukaze's crew braced for the inevitable combat, but they were unprepared for the overwhelming onslaught of U.S. forces that lasted for several days. 2 bombs struck the Asogawa Maru, setting her ablaze and causing her to sink quickly, while the submarine USS Bluegill heavily damaged the Honan Maru. Amatsukaze engaged the submarine but was unable to inflict any damage. Over the following days, further air and submarine attacks devastated the convoy, sinking most of the Japanese ships. Amatsukaze narrowly avoided being torpedoed by U.S. aircraft, evading multiple torpedo spreads, and she managed to shoot down a B-25 bomber. Despite the chaos, Amatsukaze's mission was partially successful as she made it to Hong Kong, bringing her closer to her final destination of Japan. While anchored in Hong Kong, a raid by around 50 American planes damaged several Japanese ships, but Amatsukaze was not among them. On April 4th, Amatsukaze finally left Hong Kong, accompanying the troop transports Kina Maru and Tokai Maru. This was meant to be her final journey, bringing her to mainland Japan for much-needed repairs. However, the following day, the force was spotted by Allied aircraft, and an attack by land-based bombers resulted in the sinking of both troopships. Amatsukaze responded by rescuing survivors and returning to Hong Kong. The very next day, Amatsukaze departed Hong Kong for the last time, joined by the submarine chasers CD-1 and CD-134 in yet another desperate attempt to reach mainland Japan. However, the convoy was quickly spotted and attacked by multiple waves of land-based American aircraft. Amatsukaze managed to evade the first 2 waves, but both CD-1 and CD-134 were easily sunk, leaving Amatsukaze as the sole target for the remaining bombers. When a third wave of planes struck, a bomb exploded between her aft turrets, knocking out her only functional anti-aircraft weapons, which had previously shot down 3 aircraft and damaged 2 others. Another wave of bombers hit Amatsukaze with 2 bombs, one in the auxiliary machinery room and the other in the radio room, starting fires and reducing her speed. Despite the damage, Amatsukaze pressed on as damage control teams worked to extinguish the flames and made an attempt to disguise the ship as sinking to avoid further attacks. Unfortunately, this ruse failed, and a final wave of aircraft hit Amatsukaze, dropping a bomb into her wardroom and several rockets, reigniting the fires and leaving her dead in the water with all power lost. In a final effort, the crew managed to get Amatsukaze moving at 6 knots and beached her off the coast of China to prevent her from sinking completely. Despite being struck by at least 4 bombs and several rockets, only 9 crew members were killed. The following day, Chinese pirates attempted to raid the stranded ship, killing another sailor, but machine gun fire from Amatsukaze killed most of the attackers and drove off the rest. With the help of army boats, the crew tried to refloat Amatsukaze after conducting temporary repairs, but they were unsuccessful. On the 10th, the hulked Amatsukaze was finally scuttled, marking the end of the storied destroyer's service. In 2012, a Chinese engineering vessel discovered the wreckage of Amatsukaze. Approximately 30 tons of the wreckage were salvaged, cut into pieces, and sold as scrap metal before local relics authorities intervened. According to Chinese media, plans were made to construct a museum to preserve the remaining wreckage. Amatsukaze has been praised in various American and Japanese history books for her significant role in the Battle of Guadalcanal, her survival after being torn in half, and her final stand against overwhelming enemy forces. Regardless of the side which she fought on, you have to respect her fighting spirit.